Welcome to today's deep dive. Today our mission is to unpack a single, deeply fascinating source document.
Yeah, it's a really unique one.
Right. It's titled Revelation of the Book of Ruth, and it comes to us from the Philconnexion Podcast. And right up front, I really have to mention the incredible energy they bring to this material.
Oh, absolutely. They welcome listeners to the digital altar, and they talk about kingdom frequency.
Yeah, and they sign off with phrases like testimony in motion. It is highly, highly passionate. And our goal today is to channel that passion to look at a famous ancient text from, a completely different angle.
Right, because usually ancient historical or biblical documents are treated like dusty museum relics.
Exactly. You picture them trapped behind thick glass with rigid rules and disconnected family trees. Just something you study but don't really interact with.
But the framework we are exploring today shatters that glass. It completely shifts the paradigm.
It really does.
We are looking at an argument that insists the Book of Ruth isn't just a quaint historical recount of an ancient agrarian family. Instead, it is being presented as a living cipher, like a prophetic love story.
And not just any love story. The premise here is that this very short book is actually the gospel hidden in plain sight.
Hidden in plain sight, yeah.
It's a story about Jesus Christ, but it takes place centuries before Bethlehem, before the cross or, the empty tomb. We are going to decode how every single page of this narrative supposedly points to a much larger cosmic pattern of redemption.
And before we can even begin to understand how that redemption works, we have to start at rock bottom.
Oh, for sure.
We have to understand what it means to be totally fundamentally bankrupt.
Yeah.
And that begins with a woman named Naomi.
Her journey really is the anatomy of emptiness.
It is, and the contrast is established right in the opening lines. So Naomi and her family live in Bethlehem.
Right.
And in Hebrew, Bethlehem translates literally to the house of bread. But a severe famine strikes the land.
Which is just, the irony there is wild. A famine in the house of bread.
Exactly. Now, in an ancient agrarian society, a famine isn't just an economic downturn, right? It is a slow, terrifying threat of starvation.
Yeah, life or death.
So faced with this, Naomi and her husband make a choice to leave the house of bread and cross into a neighboring foreign land called Moab to search for provision.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on a purely human level, that impulse makes complete sense.
Totally.
I want you to imagine someone leaving a very secure, life-giving environment. Let's say they have a steady career, a deep community, a solid foundation like their own personal house of bread.
Right, they have stability.
Yeah, but the economy takes a massive hit, panic sets in, and instead of riding out the lean times, they liquidate everything. They leave their secure foundation for a flashy, high-risk venture in completely unknown territory just because it promises immediate abundance.
Right, they're trying to outrun the famine.
Exactly. But instead of hitting the jackpot, the venture collapses entirely. They lose the initial investment, their savings, their home.
And in Naomi's case, the bankruptcy isn't financial, it's an absolute devastating personal tragedy.
Yeah, it's so much worse.
She doesn't just lose her livelihood in Moab, she buries her husband. Then she buries her 2 sons.
Wow.
She went looking for a better life and essentially moved into a graveyard.
Just total devastation.
The devastation is total, yeah.
Yeah.
When she finally makes the journey back to Bethlehem years later, she is entirely empty and consumed by grief. Her birth name, Naomi, actually means pleasant.
Right.
But when she arrives, she tells the people of her hometown to stop using it. She demands to be called Mara, which translates to bitter.
Bitter, wow.
And she's very explicit about why. She publicly declares that the Almighty has dealt bitterly with her. She says she brought her family out full, and God brought her back empty.
And this framework, it uses her trajectory to paint a broader picture of the human condition.
It does.
The underlying argument is that pursuing fulfillment, success, or power completely separated from a spiritual center might promise abundance, but it ultimately delivers bankruptcy.
It leaves the soul empty.
Right. But I have to push back here, or at least ask for some clarification. Naomi is literally pointing a finger at the sky and saying, God ruined my life. He made me bitter.
She is very direct about it.
So how does this theological framework reconcile the idea of a loving, redemptive God with a protagonist who is suffering this deeply and blaming him for it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text asserts something really crucial about how the divine operates in this theology.
Okay.
The argument is that God never actually abandoned Naomi, even because she was absolutely convinced that he had.
Really?
Yeah. While she was mourning in Moab, entirely focused on her profound loss, heaven was already quietly preparing a harvest that she simply couldn't see yet.
So the provision was already in motion, even in the middle of the tragedy.
Precisely. And this establishes the core rhythm of this entire interpretation. It's a pattern of moving from emptiness to fullness, from famines to harvests,
Wow.
from funerals to weddings, from ashes to beauty. The argument is that redemption specializes in restoring what seems mathematically impossible to fix.
I love that phrase.
The divine, in this view, refuses to leave empty people empty.
Which is an incredible setup for what happens next, because Naomi's utter emptiness creates this massive vacuum.
Yes.
There is a void that has to be filled, but the person who steps in to fill it actually starts with even less than Naomi does, which brings us to the character of Ruth.
Right, Ruth.
She is the ultimate outsider, and she makes a choice that changes the entire trajectory of human history.
And to understand the weight of Ruth's choice, we have to understand her status. So, Ruth is a Moabite.
Right, from Moab.
She is Naomi's daughter-in-law from her time there. Historically and legally, the Moabites were outsiders to the people of Israel.
They weren't exactly friendly neighbors.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Under the religious law of the time, she stood completely outside the assembly. She had no covenant, no inheritance, no historical claim to any of the promises given to Bethlehem.
She is entirely on the outside looking in. And yet, when Naomi is at her absolute lowest, telling her daughters-in-law to go back to their own families because she has no future to offer them, Ruth refuses to leave.
She makes this profound, famous declaration.
Yeah, she says, "Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God." Now, a surface-level reading just sees a really loyal daughter-in-law, but this analysis insists it's much deeper than that.
Much deeper. The argument is that this wasn't mere loyalty. This was radical, complete surrender.
Surrender, yeah.
Ruth is willingly leaving behind her entire identity, her native culture, her familiar gods. She is severing ties with everything that gives a person security in the ancient world.
It's like, imagine defecting to a brand new country. You have no passport.
Right.
You have no money in your bank account. You have absolutely no legal rights, no advocates, and no protections in this new place.
Terrifying.
You are stepping across a highly guarded border, betting your entire existence solely on the benevolence of the sovereign of that new land.
It's an incredibly terrifying leap into the dark.
But wait, this raises an important question. If the ancient religious law explicitly excludes Moabites from the assembly, how does Ruth just walk into Bethlehem and expect to be accepted?
That's a great question.
Like, how does this narrative resolve that collision between the strict law and her desire to belong?
Well, that collision is the central theological tension of her story. The law, by its very nature and definition, kept Ruth out.
Right. Rules are rules.
Exactly. The law has to draw lines. It dictates who belongs and who doesn't, based on lineage, on strict adherence to rules, on having the right pedigree.
Yeah.
Under a purely legalistic framework, a Moabite is excluded. End of story.
End of story.
But the perspective we're exploring argues that grace was preparing to do exactly what the law could never accomplish.
Meaning grace operates on a completely different metric.
Exactly. Grace doesn't operate on lineage. It doesn't require a flawless track record of the right passport. It operates on surrender.
That's powerful.
The analysis draws a direct, striking parallel between Ruth and the believer. It states that, spiritually speaking, everyone starts as an outsider, separated and without inheritance.
So everyone is Ruth,
Yeah.
essentially.
People are brought near not because they have an impressive past to leverage, but because grace always makes room for a repentant heart.
Wow.
The beautiful paradox presented here is that divine redemption doesn't interrogate how impressive your history is. It only asks if you're willing to follow right now.
That is a massive paradigm shift. So Ruth takes this terrifying leap of faith based on surrender, but reality sets in quickly.
Oh yeah, they have to eat.
That leap places her in a foreign land where she is incredibly vulnerable. She and Naomi have to survive. And that desperate need pushes Ruth into the harvest fields, which introduces us to a fascinating legal mechanism called the Kinsman-Redeemer.
Yes. So to survive, Ruth goes out to glean.
Which was picking up scraps, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Gleaning was a practice where the poor were allowed to pick up the leftover grain dropped by the harvesters. It was backbreaking, humiliating, and often dangerous work for a vulnerable foreign woman.
Definitely.
But she happens to end up in a field owned by a wealthy, influential man named Boaz. His name actually means, "In him is strength."
And the dynamic between them starts immediately. The analysis points out that Boaz wasn't out there looking for a bride. He was a businessman inspecting his harvest.
Right, he was just doing his job.
But he notices Ruth long before she ever notices him, and he immediately steps in. He offers her protection from the other workers, he provides her with water, and he quietly instructs his harvesters to intentionally leave extra grain behind for her to find.
And that specific detail, leaving the extra grain, is interpreted as a beautiful metaphor, right? Grace always leaves more than enough.
Unearned abundance.
Exactly. It's unearned abundance.
Right.
But Boaz's role in this story is much heavier than just being a generous boss. He operates as a Kinsman-Redeemer.
Right, this specific legal role.
Yeah. This was a vital, specific legal mechanism in ancient agrarian culture designed to protect vulnerable widows from destitution and keep land within a family line.
And this is where the cipher really comes into focus.
Yeah.
There were strict legal qualifications a man had to meet to act as a kinsman-redeemer. Let's walk through these because this framework maps them directly to the theological concept of Christ redeeming humanity.
Right, let's do it.
First, you couldn't just be a wealthy stranger. You had to be a close blood relative.
Right. And within the theological parallel, this maps to the incarnation. The idea that a distant, untouchable God couldn't legally redeem humanity from the outside.
He had to become one of us.
He had to take on flesh and blood. He had to become a brother, a close relative to the human race to qualify.
Okay, that makes sense. The second requirement is that the Redeemer must actually have the ability to pay the debt. I mean, you can't redeem someone if you are bankrupt yourself.
Exactly. And the parallel drawn here is that Christ possessed the ultimate currency.
Which is?
He didn't pay the redemption price with silver or gold. The text argues he paid the absolute price with his own blood, meaning his life.
Wow, okay. Third, the Redeemer must be completely willing. He cannot be forced into it.
Because a coerced sacrifice isn't a sacrifice.
True.
The theological map points out that no one dragged Christ to the cross. The narrative insists he went willingly for the joy set before him.
And finally, the fourth rule. The redemption couldn't be a handshake deal in the shadows. It had to be completed publicly and legally.
Yes.
And here's where it gets really interesting. If Boaz is supposed to represent this sweeping, ultimate cosmic love story, why does the narrative suddenly slam the brakes for a dry legal transaction at the city gates?
It does seem out of place, right?
Yeah. I mean, Boaz literally sits down with a council of elders and takes off his sandal to seal a contract. Why include this bureaucratic courtroom drama? Why not just have him ride in on a horse and carry her away?
What's fascinating here is how this framework defines redemption. It insists that true redemption isn't just a fleeting emotion.
It's not just a romance.
Right. It isn't just a feeling of intense love or a romantic whim that might fade when things get difficult. It is a settled, ironclad, undeniable legal reality.
It's binding.
It is entirely binding. By taking this transaction to the city gates and completing it in front of the elders, Boaz ensures that no one can ever question Ruth's status again.
Oh, wow.
Her debts are cleared. Her future is secured. It is final.
And how does that map to the theology?
This is mapped directly to the crucifixion. The cross wasn't a private event hidden in a cave. It was a brutal, incredibly public execution.
Right.
The argument is that this was heaven's eternal public declaration before the entire cosmos, before heaven, earth, and hell, that the legal price for humanity was paid in full and the redemption was accepted forever. The legality of it is what provides absolute security.
Wow. It grounds the romance in objective reality. It's not just I love you, it's you are legally mine and no one can touch you.
Exactly.
But during that transaction at the gate, a really important complication arises. Boaz actually wasn't the first in line.
No, he wasn't.
There was another man, a closer relative, who had the first legal right to redeem Ruth.
Right.
He initially wants the land, but when he finds out it comes with Ruth and all of Naomi's debts, he refuses. Why does this analysis highlight his refusal?
Because it reveals a devastating human tendency. This unnamed, closer relative backed out because of the cost.
It was too expensive for him.
Yeah. Redeeming Ruth meant taking on her massive burdens, providing for her, and risking his own financial security. He wanted to preserve his own comfortable inheritance without making a sacrifice.
He wanted the asset, but not the liability.
Precisely. And the analysis draws a stark, challenging parallel here. It suggests this man represents a common approach to faith.
Like people who just want the good parts.
Right. People who want the benefits of a relationship with the divine without any of the surrender. As the framework describes it, it's the desire for blessings without obedience, wanting heaven without holiness, and demanding the resurrection without having to go through the cross.
Man, that hits hard.
Boaz steps forward and absorbs the cost when the other man stepped back. perfectly mirroring the theological claim that Christ stepped forward to absorb the cost when humanity was completely incapable of saving itself.
So the legal transaction is finished, the sandal is exchanged, the ink is dry, Ruth's safety is secured, but the text insists the story doesn't end in a courtroom.
No, it elevates.
It elevates from a legal contract to an intimate covenant, transforming their future forever. We move from the dust of the city gate to a wedding celebration.
We do. Ruth, the destitute Moabite outsider, becomes the bride of Boaz, the Lord of the harvest.
The foreigner becomes beloved family.
The grieving widow becomes an heir to an estate. This is interpreted as a direct pointer to the concept of the church as the bride of Christ. A people who were once outsiders, chosen, purchased at a great cost, deeply loved, and prepared for an eternal union.
There's a quote from this section of the analysis that is just staggering. It says, "History is not moving toward destruction. History is moving toward a wedding."
That is an incredibly hopeful view of the future.
It really is.
So often, apocalyptic literature or discussions about the end of the world are shrouded in dread, fire, and destruction. But this perspective reframes the culmination of all human history, not as a terrifying apocalypse, but as a grand, joyful celebration, what theology calls the marriage supper of the Lamb. It's a reunion, not a demolition.
And the personal story of Ruth and Naomi closes with an intensely poignant image that reflects that joy.
Oh, the baby.
Yes, remember Naomi, the woman who returned to Bethlehem completely empty, claiming God had made her bitter, mourning the death of her sons. The book ends with her sitting in a home holding a newborn baby boy named Obed, the son of Ruth and Boaz.
Her purpose, her joy, and her family legacy have been entirely restored.
Completely. The framework notes that while tragedy might steal seasons of your life, it cannot cancel the ultimate promises of redemption.
And baby Obed is the key that unlocks the massive cosmic scope of this entire narrative.
How so?
Because Obed doesn't just grow up to be a farmer. Obed grows up and has a son named Jesse. And Jesse has a son named David, King David, the greatest king in Israel's history.
Oh, wow.
And it is from that specific unbroken royal lineage of David that the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, is eventually born.
So, what does this all mean? Let me offer an analogy to visualize this. Reading the Book of Ruth through this lens feels exactly like opening a Russian nesting doll.
I love that comparison.
Right. You look at it from the outside, the wooden exterior, and you think, what a quaint, beautifully told story about an ancient family surviving a famine.
But then you open it up.
Yeah, you open it up, and inside is this grand royal lineage of kings. And then you open that layer up, and hidden right in the very center is the blueprint for the salvation of all humanity. Every single chapter, every interaction is whispering a much larger name.
It's all connected.
But I want to bring this down to earth for a moment. For the listener right now who might be internalizing this and feeling like their own story is just deeply, irreversibly broken, what is the ultimate takeaway from this ancient text?
The ultimate takeaway is a radical redefinition of what redemption actually does. When a life is redeemed, the past isn't merely patched up. It's not just repaired with some glue.
Right.
The future is totally transformed. The core message is that divine grace fills the empty, restores the broken, and brings wanderers all the way home.
It's a complete overhaul.
It's an ironclad promise that no matter how far gone a situation seems, just as Naomi felt her life was completely over and buried in a foreign land, there is a Redeemer who specializes in taking the absolute ashes of a life and building a lasting legacy out of them.
Which brings us directly to you, listening to this deep dive right now. The analysis of this text poses some highly personal, powerful questions that we want to pass directly to you.
Yeah, it's very introspective.
Where do you find yourself in this ancient story today? Are you Naomi? Are you carrying a heavy weight of bitterness, feeling like the universe has dealt incredibly harshly with you and wondering if you've simply been forgotten?
Or maybe you identify with Ruth.
Yeah, exactly. You feel like an outsider standing on the very edge of a community, wondering if grace could ever actually reach someone with your specific history.
Or perhaps you are just standing in the middle of the harvest field, tired, vulnerable, waiting and hoping for some kind of redemption.
The beauty of this text is the reminder that the invitation to be redeemed is still wide open.
And to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today, consider that small detail of Boaz secretly instructing his workers to drop extra handfuls of grain for Ruth to find.
The unearned abundance.
Right. To her, in that moment, it just looked like a lucky find, a remarkably good day in a brutal field.
Sure.
But this analysis frames that moment as intentional grace masquerading as coincidence. It should make you wonder, what if the lucky breaks, the strange coincidences, or the accidental provisions in your own life aren't accidents at all?
Oh, that's profound.
What if they are the deliberate, quiet orchestrations of someone who noticed you in the harvest field long before you ever noticed them?
That is a beautiful thought to carry with you this week. A massive thank you to the Philconnexion Podcast for providing this incredibly rich, thought-provoking perspective. It really does take a text from behind the museum glass and turn it into a living, breathing cipher. Keep exploring, keep reading between the lines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.